I know what it's like to watch a dream turn into grief before it ever becomes real. And more than that, I know what it's like to hear people say, everything's going to be okay, when deep down, it feels like everything died along with that dream. My name is Caroline Ward. I'm 39 years old, a primary school teacher, and I live in Kansas. On the outside, I looked strong, but on the inside, I was shattered. When I lost my first baby, I didn't just lose a pregnancy. I lost my footing, my faith, and my courage. And the worst part? I started to believe that maybe God had given up on me. It's strange to say, but sometimes God's silence is louder than the pain. During that season, all I wanted was to disappear, to run away, to sleep and wake up in a life where none of it had happened. But real life doesn't allow those kinds of escapes. And it was in that desert place that God began to teach me something powerful. Before He changes the situation, He changes us. And when we change, even suffering begins to hold a new meaning. You might think this is just another story with a happy ending. But let me tell you now, the most beautiful part of this story isn't the ending, it's the middle. The place where God rebuilt what no one else could see. Where He gave me peace before He gave me answers. And where I discovered that pain is not the end, it's an invitation to experience something even deeper. If you've ever lost something you loved dearly, maybe this story is yours too. I always heard people say there are moments in life when it feels like you're living a little piece of heaven on earth. That's exactly how I felt when I found out I was pregnant. My heart was overflowing, like every beat whispered, "You're going to be a mother, Caroline." My husband, Alexander, cried when he saw the result. One of those tears you cry when you've waited so long for something that felt too far away. We had already faced challenges before, but nothing compared to the joy of that moment. I felt safe, loved, complete, as if nothing could go wrong. I remember that week like it was touched by something divine. Mornings looked more beautiful, coffee tasted better. Even the birds seemed to sing louder. Alexander talked to the baby even before we knew if it was a boy or a girl. We picked names while driving, made plans for the nursery, and dreamed wide awake as if it were already real. I walked through the streets with a smile no one really understood, but God did. It felt like He had written that chapter of my story with golden ink. But it's strange how life sometimes gives you a gift only to teach you how much deeper trust can go. I never imagined that the same God who made me feel so full would allow my faith to be tested so soon. What I didn't know was that the joy I was living would also become the foundation for something much deeper, something I would have to face and survive. Ever since I was a little girl, I imagined what it would be like to hear someone call me Mommy. It was an old dream, but it came alive the moment I saw those 2 pink lines on the pregnancy test. It wasn't just a pregnancy, it was the realization of a deep longing that had lived in the core of my being. I caught myself staring at baby clothes in store windows, jotting down ideas for biblical names, and decorating my bathroom mirror with verses. Motherhood felt like a sacred gift, as if God was giving me a new identity, a calling. Every little detail carried hope. I truly believed that this child wasn't just coming into the world, this child would change our world. Alexander was convinced it would be a girl, and was already dreaming of teaching her his favorite Bible verses. I, on the other hand, just wanted to soak up every second. I wanted to write letters to the baby, keep a pregnancy journal, and pray at night with my hand over my belly. Everything felt new, light, full of life. It was like my story had finally found its turning point. And you know what's strange? Deep down, I believed nothing could go wrong, that this blessing was divinely protected. After all, I prayed, I was faithful, and I was living the best season of my marriage. It felt like heaven had signed off on our dream. But faith is often forged in fire, and I had no idea that before I could celebrate the promise, God would walk me through a desert I never asked to enter. It was a strange morning, the kind where the silence feels heavy for no clear reason. I woke up feeling different. It wasn't pain. It was an emptiness I couldn't put into words. I tried to brush it off, telling myself it was just another typical pregnancy discomfort. But when I saw the first spots of blood, my heart dropped. I ran to the bathroom, hands shaking, and right there alone, I felt the ground fall beneath me. I called out for Alexander, but deep down, my soul already knew. Something was happening. Something I wasn't ready to face. The hospital was a blur. Medical terms I could barely process. Serious faces, cold tests, and agonizing wait. I remember staring at the white ceiling and whispering, "Lord, not now, please." The doctor came in, looked straight into my eyes, and said the words I feared most. "You lost it." That was it. Those words destroyed my dreams, my plans, my joy. It felt like my body had betrayed my heart, like I had failed the most beautiful mission God had ever given me. In that moment, everything inside me screamed. But on the outside, I was silent. No tears came, just a deafening stillness, a bottomless void. Alexander held me, but I could barely feel his arms. All I could think about was how to tell my family, how to explain something I didn't even understand myself. And worse, how to keep living with a heart that was bleeding on the inside, while the world kept going as if nothing had happened. I prayed every day, sometimes out loud, sometimes just in my thoughts, and other times through silent tears that fell without warning. But there was no answer, no words, no signs, no visible comfort. And that tore me apart inside, because the same God who had given me hope now seemed silent. And that silence was more painful than the loss itself. It felt like I was screaming in an empty room, hoping someone would hear me, but no one did. The Bible was still there on my nightstand, but I didn't have the strength to open it. Worship songs played softly in the background. Alexander was trying to keep the faith alive for both of us, but to me, it was just noise. I felt like God had pulled away, like he was looking in another direction. Instead of comfort, I was filled with questions. Why? Where did I go wrong? Is he punishing me? The truth is, I didn't want perfect answers. I just wanted to feel that he was still there, that I wasn't alone. I'll be honest, there were nights when I truly questioned whether God still loved me. It sounds hard to admit now, but pain messes with your mind. Faith becomes a battlefield. And when heaven goes quiet, you start hearing 1,000 voices that aren't God's. Some told me I was weak. Others said I deserved this. But even without realizing it, something in me kept praying, quietly, because deep down, I was still hoping that God would break the silence, somehow. I reached a point where I simply didn't recognize myself anymore. The cheerful, hopeful, faith-filled Caroline was gone. I avoided mirrors. I didn't want to see the dullness in my eyes, the tired expression, the colorless soul. People tried to cheer me up, but all I wanted was to disappear. Even my voice had changed, softer, uncertain. I stopped being a wife, a daughter, a friend. And worse, I stopped being myself. All that was left was an empty shell going through the motions. I pulled away from church because I couldn't handle the smiles, the hugs, the "God has a plan" phrases that felt more like cliches than comfort. I stopped replying to messages, turned down invitations, and left my phone off for days. Alexander tried to reach me, but I pushed him away with just a look. He didn't deserve that, I knew it, but I couldn't help it. Everything reminded me of what I had lost. Even the smell of a baby passing by on the street felt like a knife to the heart. It was easier to hide, to go silent, to bury myself emotionally. At one point, I even thought maybe it was better to just live that way, on autopilot. No pain, but no real life either. Just breathing out of habit. And the worst part was the guilt. I blamed myself for pulling away from God, for shutting out Alexander, for not being able to forgive myself. It was an emotional maze, and the further I walked into it, the darker it became. Grief isn't always about losing someone. Sometimes, it's about losing yourself. And that's when I realized, if something didn't change, I was going to be lost for good. That's when the advice started pouring in, all well-intentioned, but each one hit me like a stone to the chest. You're strong, you'll get through this. Everything happens for a reason. And of course, you need to move on. But no one ever told me how. How do you move on when you feel broken inside? How do you start over when you have no ground to stand on, no direction, and a heart crushed into pieces? My best friend, Leah, tried to help, but sometimes even her kindness felt suffocating. I didn't want to hear anything. I didn't want to go out, eat, talk, or react. And still, everyone expected me to bounce back like magic. As if grief had an expiration date. Some people even avoided the topic altogether, as if talking about the baby would make things worse, when in reality, the silence hurt more. Leah brought flowers, cakes, little notes, but I couldn't open up. The pain was mine, and mine alone. And what I wanted most was for someone to simply say, "I'm here. I may not have the answers, but I won't let you go through this alone." You know, there's a big difference between moving on and pretending you're okay. And it took me a while to understand that. While everyone wanted me to get back to life, what I really needed was to relearn how to walk through it. One step at a time. No rush. No pressure. And someone holding my hand. But even that felt far off back then. Because before I could learn to walk again, I still had to face a kind of pain I didn't even know existed inside me. It took a long time for me to realize I wasn't just sad. I was angry. Not the loud, explosive kind of anger. It was quiet, subtle. Something that lived deep in my soul. And the scariest part? I was angry at God. That hurt even more, because I was raised to love Him, trust Him, serve Him. But there I was, with a resentful heart, asking, "Why did you let this happen to me, Lord?" It's hard to admit, but anyone who's been through that kind of pain knows exactly what I mean. I didn't yell at God, but I avoided Him. I avoided prayer, avoided worship music, avoided even thinking about His promises. because I felt like he had abandoned me. Deep down, I was hurt that he hadn't done the miracle. It felt like heaven had let me down. I kept telling myself, God has his reasons, but deep inside, it felt unfair. I started building walls, spiritual defenses that blocked me from feeling anything from above. Because feeling meant hurting, and I was tired of hurting. That quiet rebellion, disguised as indifference, froze me from the inside out. I smiled when I had to, but inside, it was all cold and distance. Faith became a memory. I knew the verses, I knew the promises, but none of it reached me anymore. I didn't want to turn my back on God, but I didn't know how to get close to him again. It was like loving someone, but being too wounded to look them in the eye. That's when I realized I had to break the cycle before it broke what little was left of me. It was nighttime, the kind of night when the weight of the world feels heavier than you can carry. I locked myself in the room, lights off, curtains closed. I didn't even want to hear the sounds of the house. It was there, in that silent darkness, that my strength finally ran out. I sat on the floor, hugged my knees, and broke down. But for the first time in a long time, I talked to God. No fancy words, no memorized verses, none of the religious formalities we're taught in church. I spoke like someone who had nothing left to lose. If you can still hear me, then hear me now. That's how it started. I poured out all my pain, no fear, no shame. I told him I was angry, that I felt betrayed, that I couldn't see any purpose in anything anymore. I cried everything I'd been holding in for weeks. I didn't ask for answers, I just asked for his presence. I just wanted to feel that God was still there, even if he didn't say a word. I said, if there's still anything left in me that you want to use, then save what's left. It was raw. It was real. It was all I had. And surprisingly, that dark room became the place where I took my first step toward healing. I didn't hear a voice from heaven. I didn't see a bright light. But I felt something shift. Like God had never left. He had just been waiting for me to make space for him again. It was subtle, but it was real. And in that silence, where there had only been pain, there was now a breath. Small, but alive. It was the beginning of something new, even if I didn't know it yet. I wasn't expecting anyone that day. I was in pajamas, my hair messily tied up, just trying to slip through life unnoticed. When the doorbell rang, I even thought about pretending no one was home. But something made me get up. When I opened the door, I found myself face to face with a woman from church, Valentina Collins. I recognized her by face, but we had never really spoken. She smiled, called me by name, and said, God told me to come here. In that moment, everything inside me froze. She stepped in gently, like someone walking on holy ground. She was carrying a bag with a simple homemade cake and a worn-out Bible in her hands. She sat with me in the living room in complete silence for a few minutes. No questions, no judgment, no pressure to believe or explain. She just looked at me with tenderness and said, Daughter, you have not been forgotten. Then she began to speak, with a kind of authority that wasn't hers, but the Spirit's. Her words somehow pierced through my walls. It felt like God was finally answering the prayer I had whispered in that dark room. Valentina knew nothing about my story. And yet, Everything she said matched exactly what I was going through. It was as if God was using her to remind me of who I was and who He still is. And when she took my hand and prayed for me, for the first time in a long time, I cried out of relief. That unexpected visit was the breath of air that rekindled the last ember of faith still burning inside me. I didn't understand everything, but I knew this much. Something was about to change, even if I couldn't explain how. Before she left, Valentina opened her Bible with trembling hands and asked me to read a verse out loud. It was Isaiah 66 verse 9, which says, "Do I bring to the moment of birth and not give delivery, says the Lord." That broke me on the inside. I read it with tears filling my eyes, and at the same time, I felt a gentle breeze of hope move through my soul. It was as if God Himself was saying, "I'm not finished with your story." In the middle of my grief, there it was, a promise. For days, that verse stayed in my mind. I repeated it like a mantra. I wrote it on a sticky note and placed it on the mirror. I recorded myself reading it and listened to it often. It was the first thing since the loss that brought me any sense of peace, even if it was just a thread. And that tiny spark began to grow. I started to remember the other promises God had made in my life, and how He had never failed me. The pain was still there, but now there was something stronger than the pain, a possibility. From that day on, I kept returning to that verse like someone returning to a well in the middle of the desert. Even without knowing what lay ahead, those words gave me direction. God hadn't abandoned me. He was building something even from the ruins of what I had lost. And strangely enough, grief stopped feeling like the end and started to look like a beginning. Still fragile, yes, but full of purpose. Because a promise that is born in the midst of pain grows roots deeper than we could ever imagine. Coming back to God after a season of deep pain feels a lot like learning to walk again. You know you need to stand up, but your knees still shake. That's exactly how it was for me. The Sunday after Valentina's visit, I went to church. I sat all the way in the back, almost hiding, heart racing, like I was doing something forbidden. The worship songs felt like they were speaking directly to me. And the sermon? It felt like a letter written with my name on it. I cried a lot. But for the first time, it wasn't just sorrow. It was the kind of crying that comes with reunion. At home, I finally found the courage to open my Bible. I started with the Psalms because I knew David understood pain. Psalm 34 verse 18 hit me in a new way. The Lord is close to the brokenhearted. That was for me. I made the word my daily companion, even if it was just one verse a day. I started praying again, softly, simply, like someone learning to speak all over again. It wasn't a passionate faith, it was a wounded one. But it was still faith, and that was enough. God didn't rush me. He was gentle. Every small step I took toward Him was met with love. A worship song on the radio, a word in a devotional, a hug at just the right time. Little by little, my soul began to remember who He was, the God who had always taken care of me. And so, even while still carrying my scars, I took my first steps back into His arms, not knowing that the deepest part of my healing journey was still ahead. The loss didn't just affect my heart, it affected our home. Alexander tried to be strong, but I could see the same weariness in his eyes that I felt in mine. The pain pushed us in opposite directions, not because we lacked love, but because we lacked direction. We would pass each other in the house, say good morning, but it felt like we were living on different continents. He grieved in silence, respecting mine, but the distance between us kept growing. That's when I realized if I was drawing closer to God, I needed to bring my marriage with me. We started slow. First, just as simple, "Can I pray for you?" before bed. Then came short devotionals in the morning. Sometimes, just saying, "Let's thank God for today," brought us back into sync. I remember one night he said, "Caroline, I don't know what to say to God, but can I hold your hand while you talk to him?" That moment was so powerful. It taught me that restoring a marriage doesn't begin with big speeches, but with small, prayer-led gestures. And that's exactly what we began doing. Little by little, the conversations came back. The laughter returned. Our touch became softer, more intentional. We weren't just healing a relationship. We were rebuilding a spiritual covenant. We started declaring promises together, praying for one another, and even daring to dream about children again, even if fear still lingered. Prayer helped us remember who we were before the pain, and who we could become after it. And through that process, God began to show us that healing wouldn't come just to our bodies, but especially to our hearts. I wish I could tell you there was a specific day when I woke up healed. That would make it easier. But the truth is, healing came as a process. It showed up little by little, in a worship song that made me smile, in a prayer that finally made sense, in a hug that warmed my chest. It was like a slow sunset, where light gradually overcomes the darkness. And without even realizing it, I started to breathe differently. The heaviness didn't rule my days anymore. I still felt the ache of loss, but it wasn't crushing me like before. One of the things that helped me most was writing. I started pouring my thoughts into an old notebook, like I was making space in my soul. Writing helped me see how far I'd come. Sometimes I'd go back and read old pages, and I'd realize that the pain that once screamed, now only whispered. That was God, quietly rebuilding me from the inside out. And you know that verse in Joel 2 verse 25? "I will restore the years the locusts have eaten." I began to understand that time alone doesn't heal, but God does. I still had hard days. There were nights I cried just from missing what I'd lost. But now I knew where to run. I knew I could lay down and simply say, "Father, take care of me," and He would. God didn't just heal me, He taught me how to walk healed. He showed me that pain that doesn't kill, teaches. And the woman who came out of that grief? She was stronger, softer, and filled with more faith than ever before. Suffering taught me to trust, not in what I could see, but in who He is. And that changed everything. Even with all the healing, all the restoration, there was one question that kept coming back. What if it happens again? It felt like a shadow that followed me. Every time someone mentioned pregnancy, I smiled on the outside, but inside, the memory of the loss tightened my chest. It wasn't unbelief, it was trauma. And trauma isn't fixed by faith alone, but by faith and courage. And courage, sometimes, is choosing to keep going even when you're afraid. I knew God was with me, but my heart still trembled at the thought of going through it all again. Alexander and I started talking about the possibility of trying again. He was more hopeful. He said he had already surrendered it all to God. I, on the other hand, felt like someone standing at the edge of a cliff, wanting to jump, but frozen in fear. It was hard to imagine going through tests, doctors, nausea, and all the uncertainty again. I tried to hide it, but every step forward took an extra dose of faith. Sometimes, in the middle of the night, I'd whisper a prayer. Lord, if it's your will, prepare me before you bless me. That's when God began to work on my heart in a deeper way. He reminded me that trusting Him doesn't mean everything will turn out the way I want. It means knowing that even if it doesn't, He'll still be with me. I had to break free from that paralyzing fear. Not that it would magically disappear, but that it would no longer control me. And little by little, I began to open up. Not just to the idea of becoming a mother again, but to living a new story, even if it was written on pages I never would have chosen myself. I was used to searching for answers, clear signs, certainty. But in this new season, God taught me something different, that sometimes He sends peace even before He sends the promise. And that's exactly what happened. There was no positive test, no doctor saying everything looks good, no baby. But there was peace. A peace so real it made me smile in the silence. It felt like God was saying, "Daughter, you can rest." That peace started showing up in the little things. A slow morning coffee. A worship song that spoke directly to my soul. A walk with Alexander where the conversation was light, free from heavy expectations. I was learning to live in the now without being a prisoner of what could be. And for me, that was a miracle. Because for so long, my life had been a constant, what if? But now I could say, even if it doesn't happen, I'm at peace. That kind of mature faith doesn't appear overnight. It's the result of pain transformed into trust. And it was in that calm, steady place that I started truly living again. Anxiety no longer controlled my decisions. Fear no longer set the pace. I had learned to let God be God. Peace became my foundation, not the fulfillment of a dream. Because once you discover that His presence is greater than any blessing, everything changes. And it was right then, when my heart was finally steady, that something completely unexpected happened. It happened on an ordinary day. No special date, no sense of expectation. I was running late for work, tripped over the edge of the rug, and that's when I realized something felt different. I decided to take a home pregnancy test, without much hope, more out of routine than faith. And there, in my bathroom, holding the same kind of test that once brought tears of pain, I saw 2 lines appear again. But this time, something inside me responded differently. I didn't scream, I didn't cry. I closed my eyes and gave thanks. Alexander came home and found the test sitting on the table. His silence was so deep it made me hold my breath. When he looked at me, I saw in his eyes not just surprise, but reverence. Like someone who knows they're standing on holy ground. He hugged me and whispered, "This time, it's going to be different." And I believed him. Because this wasn't about emotion anymore. It was about surrender. I didn't know what the future held, but my heart was steady. This was a miracle, and we both knew it. Throughout the pregnancy, every doctor's visit was a mix of faith and fear. But the peace that now lived inside me became my anchor. I prayed differently now. I didn't beg. I trusted. I would say, Lord, whatever comes, I will praise you. And that changed everything. The miracle wasn't just getting pregnant, it was being able to walk through the pregnancy with calm and confidence. And for the first time in a long time, my heart wasn't weighed down. It was full of gratitude. Little did I know, this baby wouldn't just be a miracle, but an answer. A living, strong, purpose-filled answer. The day of delivery came like a sunrise after a long, dark night. When I heard my son's first cry, something inside me came back to life. Liam Ward entered the world healthy, eyes wide open, as if he wanted to see everything from the very first second. I held him in my arms and thought, you're not just a baby, you're a testimony. Every beat of his heart was a living answer that God had not forgotten me. And in that moment, my entire past seemed to make sense. Looking at him, I understood that God didn't just restore what was lost. He wrote something new. Liam wasn't born to fill a void, he was born with purpose. And I knew it from the very first touch. His name, which means strong protector, wasn't chosen by accident. It was as if God was saying, this child is a symbol of the covenant I have with you. And there, while rocking that tiny miracle in my arms, I realized that the Lord doesn't just heal. He transforms. In the days that followed, the routine changed, sleep became a luxury, and our home filled with diapers and bottles. But more than anything, it filled with hope. Every late night holding Liam became a conversation with God. I'd whisper, thank you for letting me live this. And he would answer in silence, with peace. This new life didn't just renew my motherhood, it renewed my faith. Because God didn't just give back what I lost. He gave me something even greater. The deep certainty that some purposes are only born after the pain. It took many silences, long nights, and hidden tears for me to get to this point. But today, with peace in my heart and Liam sleeping beside me, I can say with confidence, God never left me. He was with me during the nights when I could barely breathe. He carried me when I didn't have the strength to pray. He waited patiently in my dark room and answered in unexpected ways. Through people, through promises, through healing. The pain wasn't punishment, it was part of the process. I didn't understand it all at the time. In fact, I understood almost nothing. But now, looking back, I can see his care in every detail. The season of silence wasn't his absence, it was preparation. The loss wasn't the end, it was the beginning of something greater. God taught me how to trust beyond circumstances, how to find beauty even in ashes. He showed me that real faith isn't about getting quick answers, it's about staying grounded, even when everything feels lost. If you're in a season where you can't see a way out, I know exactly how that feels. But I can also tell you this, God is still there. Even if you don't feel Him, even if it's hard to believe. He's building something, even among the ruins. Because His love doesn't change with the seasons, it's constant. And it was that love that carried me through. Today, I finally understand. God didn't stop my pain, but He used my pain to show me just how deeply He loves me. And that changed everything. Maybe you're listening to this story with tears in your eyes and a heavy heart, because you're walking through your own loss. Maybe it's a baby, a dream, or a season of your life that's ended. And I get it. Pain might have silenced you for a while, but it doesn't have to define you forever. What God did for me, He can do for you too. But here's the question I want to leave with you. Are you willing to let God rebuild you from the inside out? Can you make an honest prayer today, even if it's just a whisper? Are you willing to take that first step, even if your knees are shaking? Because sometimes, the key that unlocks the miracle is a small gesture full of faith. Don't end this video just feeling emotional. Let it be the moment you decide to chase a new beginning with God. After all, if He restored my story, why wouldn't He restore yours?